Give us your thoughts then, Gearòid. Give us your initial thoughts when you learned what happened in Brussels on Tuesday. What did you think straight away?
Well, I think it was to be expected because, well, I mean, we could have, without any props from, insiders in the global oligarchy, we could have predicted what was going to happen anyway, years ago. But there was an article in the French version of the Huffington Post in January, I believe, by a top French Zionist ideologue. His name is Jacques Attali. He was an advisor to successive French governments. And he's definitely, he sits very much at the top of the pyramid in the French political elite. And he wrote an article saying that 2016 was going to be a lot worse than 2015 in terms of terrorism, that terrorism was going to get out of control, that Europe was going to be, inundated with all kinds of problems to do with terrorist attacks, that the security services were not going to be able to deal with it, and so on. And at the same time, that there was the mass migration into Europe was going to accelerate as well. So that you were going to have a massive increase again in the influx of people from the Middle East in particular, but also from, I guess, right across the African continent into Europe in 2016. And with an increase in terrorism, that terrorism was going to get out of control. And there was going to be no end to, the wars, such as the war in Syria, and all of the other wars that are pretty much ongoing, like the war in Iraq, which never really ended, the war in Libya, which never really ended, because these wars are ongoing. These are kind of permanent wars, if you like. They're fires that have never been put out. So it was, this looks like pretty much what he was talking about at that time. And I think that that's essentially what we're seeing. We're seeing there are two main aspects to keep in mind here. One is the strategy of tension, which was a policy implemented by NATO during the Cold War to maintain support for antisocial states in Europe against the possibility of a Soviet threat. And that support for antisocial states was maintained through bombings of civilian targets in Europe by far-right groups in the service of Western intelligence agencies, in particular the CIA, but also Masonic groups, for example, the P2 Lodge in Italy, were deeply involved in this. So the European elite during the 1970s and 1980s were involved in a vast conspiracy against the public to maintain the Cold War. And that was referred to as Operation Gladio. It's been proven to have existed because there are documents to prove that it existed. And in fact, the European Parliament confirmed its existence in 1991 and condemned it. And there is still a process, there are court proceedings against it, but there's rarely any media coverage of it. And Gladio is something that is rarely spoken about, but it has been covered by the BBC. The BBC did an excellent documentary about it. I think it was 1992. The French media refer to it every now and then, discreetly. But Gladio did exist, and Gladio still exists. It's never been, decommissioned. This covert military intelligence operation. And so I see these attacks as probably being part of that. One never knows, of course, because these ISIS militants, even though they were created by the United States, and we know that from the documents of the United States government itself, and from statements by senior U.S. officials that ISIS or Daesh or ISIL is a creation of the United States. But we have, I think that there are strong indications that Gladio as a geopolitical strategy by NATO has never been disbanded, has never been decommissioned, and that what we're seeing is an escalation of that, bearing in mind that there is a global war going on and that is concentrated in the Middle East right now, in Syria, but that is spreading out from Syria into other countries like the North Caucasus, into Central Asia, and so on. It's going right through Africa. And this is a colonial war for resources. It's a colonial war of conquest for the richest and most important regions in the world by an oligarchy, crushing the laboring masses, crushing the working class in Europe through austerity. What would you expect from such people?
Yeah.
They have absolute contempt for the public. They have absolute contempt for ordinary people. And people need to wake up, because the more they buy in to their lies and their media propaganda campaigns, the more ordinary people suffer.